DJ Scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Hood rich.
Get it out the mud.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And we're back. We're back with some more appetizers for you. And I'm talking about UFC 319 Du Plessis versus Chimaev. And I'm talking Dricus du Plessis, DDP, and Khamzat Chimaev. And this fight is August 16th, 2025 at the United Center in Chicago, Illinois, United States, and should be 10 Eastern, 9 Central time for the pay-per-view. And this is kind of surprising to me that this is the first UFC event in Chicago since June 2019, and that was UFC 238. So like 6 years since the UFC's been back into Chicago. And man, during those pre-fight press conferences, I guess I'm not up to date or follow UFC social media enough to know like how much the fans, or at least the people interviewing, the interviewers at least, how much they like dislike DDP, but like love Khamzat Chimaev. Like they were just like raining down boos on Dricus du Plessis, which I was a little surprised. So those are kind of an unknown as to why people hate Dricus du Plessis so much and why people like Khamzat Chimaev so much. I kind of understand the Khamzat Chimaev one a little bit more just because of his like dominant fighting style and some of the crazy stuff that he says during interviews. So I can maybe understand why so many people like him. But anyways, let's kind of get into this card. I'll break down the preliminaries a little bit. I think some of these fights, there's been some fights kind of fall off here kind of in like the last 48 hours. I've had some fights kind of fall apart. We had Bobby King Green versus Carlos Ferreira. That was going to be like either the co-main event or like the main event of the standard prelims. So that's just a little disappointing that we won't get to see Bobby Green. And then on weigh-ins, Brian Battle weighed in 4 pounds over for middleweight. And even like non-title weight, so it would have been more like 5 pounds because it should have been 185, but he weighed in at 190. And at first they acted like they were going to go ahead and push forward with the catch weight, but then just the whole bout fell apart altogether. And because of that, there's only one fight on early prelims, and this is already kind of a card that really feels, just from looking at it from a distance, this card really feels kind of really top heavy. But we'll get into that more once we ask for our menu here. So that you only have one fight on early prelims, so you won't be able to start watching the UFC or just the early prelims at like 4 or 5 p.m. and then have fights for the next 7 hours, all the way till midnight. So, but there are really not any really notable names on that card, anyways. I guess it's Alabib Adiras versus Joseph Morales, which that's the Ultimate Fighter 33 flyweight tournament. I can't remember if it was this fight where the guy is having a turnaround, like he just fought on Wednesday and now he's fighting just 4 days later. I don't know if it was this fight that's the early prelim or actually it's the main event of the preliminary card, Basinger versus Eric Nolan. But one or the other of those, you got guys turning around on just like 4 days notice to fight one, and then obviously short notice for the guy that's fighting just 4 days before he knew he had an opponent. One or the other on that, and then you do have some kind of familiar names, but kind of maybe they're kind of washed, kind of gatekeepers, Jags, stepping stones, kind of at this point in their career. But you have a couple kind of maybe fight night worthy type of fights on the preliminary card. You have about four of them because you got a lightweight bout between Edson Barbosa versus Draker Close, Chase Hooper versus Alexander Hernandez, former women's title holder Jessica Andrade versus Lupi Godinez, uh, and then this is the co-main event to the Basinger versus Eric Nolan bout. You have Gerald Mearstart, who was speaking of the main event. He was I think he may have been the debut fight for Khamzat Chimaev, or one of the first fights in the UFC, and he got knocked out by Khamzat Chimaev in like what was it, like 7 seconds. And he's fighting at middleweight. He's fighting Mikel Olenjeku. So you got some kind of familiar names, not any superstars on the prelims, and then there hardly is any early prelims, but there's some name recognition, so it's at least worth watching, or at least it will be good enough for background noise, even if you're at your home or even at the bar while you're eating before the main card actually starts. But anyways, let's get on to the main card of UFC 319, Du Plessis versus Chimaev. So can I get a menu? And so the first fight on the card, you have a flyweight bout between Tim Elliott versus Kaya Askarov. And I already kind of have like my mind made up on this fight, and it's because kind of you got these guys that are coming over from these different promotions, like Kaya Askarov. He came over from a different promotion of like a former champ from a different promotion, and highly touted, which you have another guy making a debut uh, with the same type of credentials, coming over from a different promotion and highly touted and a multi-time champion at another organization. But then they kind of have like disappointing debuts, and that's what happened to Kaya Askarov. He came over from a different promotion and got a title fight. Right away? Yeah, it was for the UFC flyweight championship, and lost to Alexander Pantoja, submission rear naked choke. So definitely had an unimpressive performance in his first bout in UFC. So possibly that could possibly happen with Tim Elliott as well, who's also a good wrestler and has a submission game. So that's what I fear may happen to Kyle Oscura. But I'm talking about these guys that come over from these different promotions, like Aaron Pico is making his debut against Leron Murphy. But we've seen in the past with obvious like Kyle Oscura not being impressive in his first uh, bout in the UFC and losing it. But you also had some other ones that were more recent as well, or just as recent. And Patchy Mix, he lost. And then you had Patricio Pitbull. He lost in his debut. But these guys were like superstars at other organizations. But so Tim Elliott, he's a bit of Tim Elliott is definitely a step down in competition from Alexander Pantoja. So maybe I'm not showing Kai Oscura enough respect, but Tim Elliott, he's 38 years old, and this is a flyweight bout, and he is in his last five fights. He is 3-2 in his last five fights, and he's on a one fight winning streak. And uh, in his 34 fights, he has 20 wins and 13 losses. And in those 20 wins, 3 of them have been by knockout. 7 of them have been by submission. So that's kind of what I highlight for that. And his last win was a arm triangle choke. So that's something to really pay attention to here to see if it was just that Alexander Pantoja is just an amazing fighter, an amazing champion. Like that's what the issue was, or if the UFC is just too big of a step up for Kai Askarov because he got because Tim Elliott has some submissions in his career, and his last fight was a technical submission arm triangle choke. So he put Su Majira, he put him to sleep, and that's actually what happened to Kaya Askira. He actually got put to sleep in a rear naked choke. Like he wasn't before he was able to tap. He went to sleep. So we'll see if that might happen again. And then he's had 10 wins by decision, and in his 13 losses, he's had only been knocked out 1 time. So that's interesting because that Kaya that's kind of been his main path to victory, and it's pretty impressive being 125 pounds and having such great knockout ability. But Tim Elliott's shown that he's got a pretty good chin over his career with only being knocked out once, and then he's been submitted 6 times and lost by decision 6 times, and then just the 1 draw. But Kaya Askura, he's much younger than Tim Elliott, only 38. Tim Elliott, or only 31 with Tim Elliott, 38. So and he's not the champion. He's not the title holder. So maybe that will be a big difference with Kaya not necessarily not stepping down in promotions, but at least stepping down in competition from the best in the world in the flyweight division to someone that's kind of just in the top 15. So in his and see the majority of his last couple fights have all been in Ryzen, but still in his last 5 fights he's 3-2, and he's on the one fight losing streak in the UFC with his 1 fight in the UFC at UFC 310 to Alexander Pantoja, and that was December 7th, 2024, where he got put out by a technical submission, went to sleep in a rear naked choke at the 2:05 mark of the second round. But he has 26 fights in his career with 21 wins and 5 losses, and in those 21 wins he has 13 wins by knockout. So those 13 wins by knockout is really what's impressive for a flyweight, 125 pounder with such power in his hands. But maybe that has more to do because he's been fighting in Ryzen promotion, and then he has 3 wins by submission, 5 wins by decision, and then in his losses he's been knocked out 3 times and only submitted 1 time, which that's why that's so odd. And that's so impressive, really, by Alexander Pantoja. Up until that fight, he'd never been submitted or just put to sleep, at least by submission, and then lost one by decision. So he doesn't have a lot of losses, but I still feel that Tim Elliott is still it's still a big step up in competition, for Kaya Askarov, Patchy Mix, Patricio Pitbull, and now we're even in the co-main event we have Aaron Pico. So in this flyweight bout between Tim Elliott versus Kai Askarov, I'm going to go with Tim Elliott, the wrestler Tim Elliott, and I think he's going to end up getting the submission again. I think Kai Askarov is going to get submitted again, and maybe he'll have enough time to tap this time, and I think that's going to be maybe like a head and arm triangle at some in like the second or third round. That's what I'm looking at for that. I don't think Kai Askarov luck is going to improve, but it would be nice. It would be exciting to see some of that knockout power and explosion that you saw from him in Ryzen. But UFC, it's the best in the world, so it's hard pressed to say that we will see that. So on to Now then, on to the middleweight bout between Jared Cannonier versus Michael Page. And honestly, besides the main event, this may be the fight that I'm most excited for, most anticipated for me, because this is just a wild matchup between two explosive knockout artists. You got kind of like the explosive, like devastating knockout power that you get from Jared Cannonier, who has a good wrestling game. It'll be interesting to see early on in this fight how the striking game goes, and if Jared Cannonier feels that he needs to revert back to his wrestling game and try to take Michael Page down, like pretty much everyone that fights Michael Page, because Michael Page doesn't have necessarily quite the devastating like knockout power, but he's just so technical, and he has that jumping in and jumping out, like kind of like karate, kickboxing style, where he's just trying to land like one or two big shots, and then he gets back into his set. And sometimes he's standing sideways with kind of like a karate style, and he's just looking to counter. But Jared Cannonier, be interesting to see if he feels that the need to that he's not getting off enough in the striking game against MVP to where he needs to revert to his wrestling and try to go for a takedown. But Jared Cannonier, he's a former title challenger in the middleweight division, and in his last 5 fights, and I think he's pretty. I think he's 41 years old, so he's getting a little long in the tooth, but I think MVP he's also like 37 years old himself. Yeah, 38. So he's not a whole lot younger in himself. But Jared Cannonier in his last 5 fights, he is 3-2, and he's on a 1 fight winning streak on over Gregory Rodriguez, TKO punches, and that was February 15th, 2025, and that was impressive for Jared Cannonier to get that knockout, the TKO knockout like that, because he's an older fighter. He kind of has to cut a lot of weight to make middleweight, to make 185. But he got that knockout over Gregory Rodriguez at the 21 second mark of the fourth round. So that was pretty impressive. But Cannonier in his 26 fights, he has 18 wins with 8 losses. In those 18 wins, he has 11 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission, and 5 wins by decision. So, I mean, more than half of his wins come by knockout. So, if he's going to win this fight, I would say that's about really the only way that he could beat Michael Venom Page, unless he does take him down and reverts back to that wrestling game. But I almost feel as if he won't even be able to get a hold of MVP. And then in his 8 losses, he's been knocked out 3 times. So it shows that he can be knocked out. Like just like we're saying with Jared Cannonier, like his best way of winning is probably knocking MVP out. Well, same with MVP. His best chance of winning is probably path to victory is probably by knockout as well. And then Cannonier, even though he's got a good wrestling game, he hasn't had a lot of submissions, but he's also has a good submission game as well, defense as well, because he's never been submitted. 0 submission losses, and then five wins by decision. All right, so Michael Page kind of he's another fighter that came over from Bellator, a different organization, and it took him a little while to get his footing. I think he lost his debut fight in the no, I guess he didn't. He didn't lose his debut fight in the UFC. Beat Kevin Holland by unanimous decision. But anyways, it seems like all these fighters are in their last 5 fights, or until we get to the ones that are undefeated here with Leron Murphy and Khamzat Chimaev. Before we get to those guys, it seems like all these guys are 3-2 in their last 5 fights, and is on a one fight winning streak. Shahar Magmadov is the last fight he had. won by decision, 3 rounds, where he returned to middleweight. But in his 26 fights, he has 23 wins with just 3 losses. In the 23 wins, he has 13 wins, 13 wins by knockout. So, I mean, that shows that's like more than half of his fights also are by knockout, just like Jared Cannonier, but they're completely different styles. You know, Jared Cannonier is more of like a boxer and a wrestler, while Michael Venom Page is like a taekwondo, karate, kickboxer, and then he's had 3 wins by submission, 7 wins by decision, and then in the 3 losses, he's only ever been knocked out once. So that, the age, as long as the age and the chin holds up, that may be the reason why Jared Cannonier won't be able to win this fight, is because of that, and it's because Michael Page has such a good jaw, and then never been submitted either, and only 2 losses by decision. So in this bout between Jared Cannonier versus Michael Venom Page, MVP, I think I'm gonna go with MVP. Like this, a lot of these fights kind of feel kind of like coin flips or 50-50, and I'm probably gonna be kind of leaning to more like to fan favorites or guys who I like when it comes down to that. And like I said, like this card really kind of looks not that impressive, kind of mid from a distant view, just because there's not a lot of like superstar names on the card. There's a lot of notable names, but not a lot of superstars. And there's only one title fight on this card. But because of that, these kind of coin flips in this middleweight bout between Jared Cannonier versus Michael Venom Page, MVP. MVP. I'm going with Michael Page, and I think he's going to get the knockout. He's going to knock Jared Cannonier out, and he's really going to supplant himself in the middleweight division and maybe make some noise in the middleweight division on a possible title opportunity, or maybe at least a title eliminator bout in his next fight, maybe a 5-rounder on a fight night or something, to where he can supplant himself as the #1 contender. So I'm going with Michael Page to get the knockout of Jared Cannonier. All right, now then, on to the third fight on the card. We have a welterweight bout between Jeff Neal versus Carlos Prates, and both of these fighters are kickboxers. So you got like strength versus strength here, and Jeff Neal is also 3-2 in his last 5 fights, and he is on a 1-fight winning streak over Rafael dos Anjos, who actually was TKO'd, but it was due to a knee injury, and that was at the 1:30 mark of the first round. But before that happened, Jeff Neal was on a bit of a losing streak, but to some really great fighters, though. He lost to Shavkat Rakhmonov, rear naked choke. That was at UFC 284 on March 4th, 2023. So that was quite a while back. And then Ian Machado Gary, split decision loss at UFC 298, February 17th, 2024. So some of those losses were quite a while back, and it's been a little while since he's fought Rafael dos Anjos. That was October 26th, 2024. But yeah, he's just like all the previous fighters I've stated. They've all are like 3-2 in their last 5 fights, and he's has 22 fights in his career with 16 wins and 6 losses. In those 16 wins, he has 10 wins by knockout, 2 wins by submission, and 4 wins by decision. And then in his 6 losses, he has only been knocked out once, submitted twice, and 3 losses by decision. And then Carlos Prates, I think he was on a little bit of a he was on a pretty good undefeated streak there for a while before his last fight. So this is the first fighter that he's actually 4-1 in his last fight, but he's on a one fight losing streak. Also to Ian Machado, just like Jeff Neal, he lost to Ian Machado Gary by way of decision, a unanimous decision, and that was in a 5 rounder back on April 26, 2025, on a fight night. But he was on a pretty good winning streak before that. Not all in the UFC though, but let's see. 11. He was on an 11 fight winning streak before he lost to Ian Machado Gary, and he had won five. He had won 5 fights in a row in the UFC before he lost to Ian Machado Gary. So that's something to take into consideration. And in his 28 fights, he's had 21 wins with 7 losses. 7 losses in the in the in the 21 wins, he has 16 wins by knockout. So that's really impressive. Like you know how Carlos Prates is coming to win. Like it's either probably a knockout or nothing. So 16 wins by knockout, 3 wins by submission, and 2 wins by decision. And then in the 7 losses, he has been knocked out 2 times and lost 3 by submission and then 2 by decision. But in his 28 fights, only 4 have ever gone to decision. So I'm looking for a stoppage here, and I think Carlos Prates is a little bit more feels a little bit more on the rise, even though Jeff Neal's only 34 and Carlos Prates is only 31. But in this welterweight bout between Jeff Neal versus Carlos Prates, I'm going with Carlos Prates. I think he's going to get the knockout here because I think you're going to both of these guys are initially going to want to stand and strike and see who's better with their kickboxing. So it'll be interesting to see if Carlos Prates kind of starts to overtake Jeff Neal in the striking game. If Jeff Neal attempts to go for any type of takedowns or ground game or just clinching and trying to push up against the cage, or maybe my pick will be wrong and it'll be Carlos Prates trying to do that. But those 16 career knockouts kind of lead me to believe, like I just said, it's either knockout or not for Carlos Prates. Like he's either going to get knocked out or he's knocking Jeff Neal out. Jeff Steel, hands of steel, Neal. All right, now then, on to the co-main event, featherweight bout between Leron Murphy versus Aaron Pico, and so this could easily be a title eliminator bout for a featherweight championship. Definitely, I think maybe just a win for Leron Murphy could get him in line for the next shot at the featherweight belt, but I would say maybe it has to be more of an impressive win by Aaron Pico to get that next title shot or put you in the top five rankings in featherweight. So you're not far away from the next shot at it. But Leron Murphy, I kind of just remember he's known as a striker as well, uh, and he is undefeated. So he's see he is has 17 fights in his career, but he's 16-0 with just a 1 draw. And in the UFC, he is on an 8 fight winning streak in the UFC because his first fight what what went to a split draw. But since then, I don't really want to say he's been on a tear necessarily, because I can definitely kind of remember his last couple fights were a little kind of boring. I mean, he beat Josh Emmett beat Josh Emmett pretty bad. Like had him cut and black eye and all that business at the end of the fight, but he hasn't been getting stoppages in a while. All of his fights have been going to decision, unanimous decisions. His last 5 fights have all gone to decision. The last stoppage he had was back at UFC 267, back October 30th, 2021. That was a KO knee over Makwan Marakani. That was at 14 seconds of the second round. That was in Abu Dhabi. But since then, it's all been just decisions. Gabriel Santos, Joshua Alaboa, Edson Barbosa, Dan Ige, Josh Emmett. So, I mean, some impressive names there with Edson Barbosa, Dan Ige, Josh Emmett. And I mean, those are really tough guys. So I could understand why he's not getting those guys out of there. But I just, at least from my recent memory, I'm not sure how good my short-term memory is. I just remember his fights being kind of boring and him kind of just winning off the scorecard. Whether or not Barbosa, Dan Ige, Josh Emmett look like their faces gone through a wood chipper after the fight, still not as fun and exciting and as impressive as stoppages, whether it's a knockout or a submission. But obviously, in his last 5 fights, he's 5-0, and in his 17 matches, he has 16 wins, 0 losses, 1 draw, and in the 16 wins, he has 7 wins by knockout. Even though it's been a while, it's been like about 4 years since he's had a knockout, and then nine wins by decision. So, and then the losses, never knocked out, never lost by decision, never submission, just never lost, and then the draw. But with those 9 decision victories, he's kind of been, at least the last 4 years, he's kind of been a unanimous decision merchant, or just a guy that kind of just wins off of technical striking and wins off the scorecard, not and lets it go to the distance pretty often. But he is fighting. He is fighting Aaron Pico, who is like a decorated wrestler that's kind of transitioned over to mixed martial arts. He's only 28 years old, and just has all gold and Grand Prix as a freestyle wrestler, golds and silvers and bronze medals, all the way back to 2013 when he was probably just a kid then. But another highly touted fighter coming over from a different organization. So he just like MVP, he's coming over from Bellator, where he is in his last 5 fights. He's 4-1, and he's on a 3-fight winning streak, with his last 2 fights being TKO knockout victories over Henry Corrales and Pedro Carvalho. And both of those were in the first round. But it's that step up in competition. The UFC it isn't Bellator. Kaya Askarov learned that pretty recently. MVP won his first fight. Patchy Mix learned that recently, and Patricio Pitbull learned that recently. So that's going in a lot to my decision here. So he's had 17 fights in his career with 13 wins and 4 losses. In those 13 wins, 9 of them have been knockouts by KO. So even though he's such a great wrestler, sometimes he does have that power in the hands, and also has that vicious ground and pound as well. And then he has 2 wins by submission and 2 wins by decision. But even him being such a decorated and such a great freestyle wrestler, it's a little surprising that he doesn't have a few more victories by submission. And then he has 4 losses, 3 wins by knockout, and 1 win by submission. So I mean, I could, with those 3 wins, he's definitely shown that he can be knocked out, even though his most recent loss by knockout, TKO, it was due to a shoulder injury, not necessarily getting his lights shut out. TKO shoulder loss to Jeremy Kennedy, Bellator 286, October 1st, 2022. And that must have been between rounds, the 5 minute mark of the first round. Must have hurt his shoulder. So really, really just official, like getting his lights shut out and the ref having to come in to save him. Really only two. And then he's been submitted once and never lost by decision. But I'm sticking to what I've seen here recently in the UFC. These fighters, these highly touted championship fighters coming over from different organizations. Majority of the time, the bright lights of the UFC, at least in their first fight, usually tends to be like too much for them. And even though the first fight maybe ends up being too much for them, but sometimes they end up getting their footing after their first fight. But you got to take into account some of these guys. I think a lot of these guys like Patchy Mix and Patricio Pitbull, the reason that you could maybe say that they lost their first fights in the UFC is that they were used to like almost all their fights being 5 round fights. But I don't think that's necessarily the case with Aaron Pico here. But in this featherweight bout between Leron Murphy versus Aaron Pico, I'm going with Leron Murphy because he's right on the cusp of getting a featherweight championship bout. And you're having this guy, Aaron Pico, who I know is a great wrestler with knockout power, coming in and getting his shot at like a number one contender, a guy that's like one fight away from a title shot. That feels very Kai Oscura, Alexander Pantoja esque. But I don't see Leron Murphy's uh, uh, a streak of winning his fights by decision changing much, even though Aaron Pico has been knocked out 3 times in his career, so he can be knocked out. But I think Leron Murphy is going to continue the very technical striking and kickboxing, and I think he's going to win this fight on the judges' scoring card and by statistics, numbers of strikes landed, significant strikes, all that. I don't see him finishing Aaron Pico by way of knockout or submission. So in this featherweight bout between Leron Murphy versus Aaron Pico, I'm going with Leron Murphy to win by uh, decision, whether it's unanimous or split decision. If it's going to go that way, I kind of hope that it's a split decision. So maybe we can say that it was an exciting fight and Aaron Pico was in the fight and just didn't get overwhelmed coming over from a different organization. So that's your co-main event. Now then, on to your main event as a middleweight championship bout between Dricus du Plessis, the champion, versus Khamzat Chimaev, the challenger. So I mentioned how it seemed like Dricus du Plessis, DDP, man, he was getting a lot of heat in that pre-fight interview press conference. Lots of boos. Very reminiscent when I saw it and heard it, and very reminiscent to Dominic Mysterio, pro wrestling. How anytime he had anything to say or wanted to say things, boos just drowned him out, and he just have to wait until they cooled off a little bit. So he was antagonizing the crowd a little bit and saying how he was impressed with their boos on him and how he knew that the fans were going to run out of steam to boo him, and that was just kind of funny. So maybe that's why people don't like him. But like I said, I hadn't really kept up with him, with Dricus du Plessis or Khamzat Chimaev. I don't really keep up with social media like Twitter or Instagram for UFC really all that much. Mostly just NFL and a little bit of NBA, but don't follow the temperature gauge of how other fans feel about some of these fighters. And I'm one that actually likes both of them. Just within their last couple fights or last fight is where I finally jumped on Dricus du Plessis' bandwagon, jumped on Khamzat Chimaev's bandwagon. But now that I'm on both of their bandwagons, they're fighting each other. So that makes this a highly anticipated match. And a lot of people said that like this is the best fight of 2025. I don't. It hasn't happened yet. We don't know how it's going to go or if it is going to actually be a good fight. But I would say it's definitely the most highly anticipated fight of 2025. So I'll give it that. But we don't really know how it's going to go. But these are both two like great, strong. Like that's like the big um, trait that both of these guys have is just how strong they are. They're both strong wrestlers, but they also have knockout power in their hands. And Dricus du Plessis, even though he's not really a technical striker, even though he does have some kickboxing uh, background, like he's one of those guys like he'll take you down, and then if you get back up, he'll push off of you, and then you just got these windmills of punch, and it doesn't look very technical or professional like an MMA professional fighter, but it's effective, and I guess that's all that matters. And he's a champion as well, and he's got quite a long winning streak, impressive winning streak going here as well. See, get these. See, so he's on a 12 fight winning streak, and he is 10-0 in the UFC. So he's 5-0 in his last 5 fights, and he has won the belt over Sean Strickland, and then he's defended it twice against Israel Asanye, and then the rematch over Sean Strickland. But in his 25 fights, he has 23 wins with 2 losses. In the 23 wins, he has 9 wins by knockout, 11 wins by submission, and 3 wins by decision. And then in the 2 losses, he's been knocked out once, and then he's been submitted once, and then 0 losses by decision. But yeah, a lot of people talk about how he's knockout and has great ground and pound and wrestling, but I mean he's a great submission artist too. I think that kind of gets overlooked. That's something that would be so crazy if he's the one that takes Khamzat Chimaev down and submits him would be so crazy. And Dricus du Plessis says he's not gonna think a whole lot about the first takedown, like defending the first takedown about Khamzat Chimaev, because he says that he knows that he'll get right back up. I guess we'll have to wait and see that about that. But both of these guys have kind of I can't necessarily say similar styles, but they're both have very unique styles and like one of one type of styles. Dricus du Plessis is a great wrestler with great submission game, and then he's got a wild knockout striking game where he's just like windmilling punches and throwing back elbows and spinning back fist, but it looks ridiculous, and you would think you'd think a great counter striker would be able to catch him and knock him out, but in 10 UFC fights it hasn't happened yet. But I guess we'll have to see with his fight against Phenom Khamzat Chimaev, who very impressively, he's kind of had an issue with health and making weight. He was 2 pounds under the 185 pound rank. He weighed in at 183. Yeah, 183, which is very impressive. That's been kind of a conversation, a bit of a conversation about him. A key conversation about him is how good is his conditioning. But I guess we'll see if this fight goes 5 rounds. He's never been in a 5 round fight before. Never been in a fight that's gone 5 rounds. I guess the Robert Whitaker bout was maybe a 5 rounder. But he is 14-0 with with 8-0 in the UFC with very impressive victories. You know, they're all of them set the bout between Gilbert Burns and Kamaru Usman, and they've all been stopped by way of stoppages. And then also all the ones before the UFC, it all came by stoppage, like knockout or submission. And then his so he's obviously 5-0 in his last five fights and 14-0 in his career. In his 14 wins, he has 6 wins by knockout, 6 wins by decision, and then even 2 wins by decision, which were over uh, former champion or title challengers. Kamaru Usman, a former champion, and Gilbert Burns has fought for the belt before. So some impressive wins, and then just in his last fight, just absolutely sunning and dominating Robert Whitaker, like breaking his jaw and breaking like moving the bottom row of his teeth with such a powerful face crank. So I could see Khamzat Chimaev winning this fight by knockout or submission, but I could also see Dricus du Plessis winning by knockout or submission. A good example of how like strong Khamzat Chimaev is that there was a video of him leading like just a couple days before the pay-per-view where he ran into Daniel Cormier, who's probably like close to 300 pounds, and playfully Daniel Cormier tried to like set his hip and try to act like he's gonna take Khamzat Chimaev down. Khamzat Chimaev just bear hugged Cormier, who was like 300 pounds, and just picked him up and swung him around like he was a little kid or like his girlfriend or something. Man, there would be a riot if Khamzat Chimaev would have like hurt himself doing that. Man, there would have been a riot. People would have been coming to to Daniel Cormier's coming for his head and coming to his house for like ruining this pay-per-view that only has one championship bout anyways. And then something kind of interesting in some interviews between Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. Dricus du Plessis says he doesn't do it for the money, he does it for the belt and his legacy, while Khamzat Chimaev does do it for the wealth and bettering his community. So they both kind of do it for different reasons, but I would assume that neither one of them wants to lose. They both want to win. So whatever your uh, uh, motivation is, doesn't matter once you're at this level of fighting. But in this middleweight bout between Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev, man, this is a hard one just because I've just kind of become a believer and kind of a fan of both of them. But I just feel like with Dricus du Plessis, with his wild striking and 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 just looks so reckless, that Khamzat Chimaev with that not one shot knockout power, if he catches Dricus du Plessis, he could put him to sleep. But also don't think that's how he's going to win. I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to end up submitting Dricus du Plessis. We may see something like what he did to to Robert Whitaker. You know, it's just going to be such a dominant win that we're going to be surprised by it. I hope that's maybe a little bit. I hope it goes maybe a little bit longer, but I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to solidify himself as maybe the right there with Ilya Tapora as like one of the biggest superstars in the UFC. Even though at the same time I'm saying I'm a fan, I've almost feel as if we have enough um, Russian Muslim championships. But sorry about that. My phone started ringing. Didn't have it on silent. But talking about all the Russian Muslim fighters, I guess it'd be okay to have like one more. So in this middleweight bout between Dricus du Plessis, the champion, versus Khamzat Chimaev, I'm gonna go with Khamzat Chimaev. I just think it would be so much more groundbreaking and just kind of set off a supercharge for UFC and people's interest in it, with Khamzat Chimaev being the champion in uh, the middleweight division, and that goes a long way too. Once you get into those bigger weight classes, I think there's more respect for guys that once you kind of start at like, yeah, 185, 205, and then heavyweight. That's where you really need to have superstar fighters, because these littler guys people kind of look past. But Khamzat Chimaev, apparently he's got like 10 million followers, and apparently at least Chicago, Illinois, hates Dricus du Plessis and loves Khamzat Chimaev. So I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev to win this. I think he's going to win by submission. I think we may see another rear naked choke, like what we saw against Robert Whitaker, or maybe head and arm triangle choke. And uh, they talked a lot about Khamzat Chimaev's conditioning, and Dricus du Plessis talks about how he wants to pull him into deep waters, like in the third, fourth, fifth round. So I'm going to say it has Chimaev is going to get this submission. It's going to need to be like in the second round, or at least early in the third round. So in the middleweight bout between Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev, I'm going with Khamzat Chimaev to win this by submission. So that's UFC 318. Dricus du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev. This is a card that kind of like a lot of cards here recently, whether it's a fight night or a pay-per-view. For the most part, a lot of times they're kind of top heavy, and these last couple pay-per-views only having one title defended on them. I think even the last UFC 318, that wasn't even a title at all. It was the BMF belt. Like, it wasn't for a world championship. So uh, that's kind of a downer on this card, making it still a little bit of mid. But I think there's a lot of good fights here. There's a lot of potential, at least for my picks, for the top five picks of the pay per view. I've picked them, four of the five to all be stoppages, either submission or knockout. So I'm ready for it, and I hope we get something legendary and unforgettable on Saturday night. And with the two guys fighting in the main event for the middleweight championship bout, I feel as if that it almost be hard not to. But a lot of these great fights that are plugged to the ceiling, sometimes you get letdowns from them. But where both fighters are kind of cautious of being the first one to initiate anything. But I don't think we'll get that out of Dricus du Plessis and Khamzat Chimaev. But I'm ready for it, and I'm excited, just like pretty much every pay-per-view. But anyways, I think that's about all I have for you. So can I get a check, please?